Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. As you know, this is a show about astrology, and I often try to bend the conversation in different ways to incorporate other forms of other modalities that are equally aligned in some way, or also offer insights. And I'll have a guest coming on in a few minutes for that to talk about the Kabbalah today, which would be a great topic. Before we get started, I want to remind you about my newsletter. My newsletter goes out every Sunday. And in there, you'll find a couple of paragraphs of mundane astrology, which applies to the globe in general and all of us in general, which is good to follow because we see significant transits happening at times when significant world events are happening, and there's no surprise that happens. That's why it's so accurate. Astrology is so amazingly accurate. I also go into the individual signs below that. My newsletter is very popular. I get a large openness on it and a lot of support for it. And I would encourage those of you who really do enjoy it to sort of follow me, follow through with perhaps a little bit of a repayment for all the work I've done over the years by throwing $1 or $2 into the my Patreon page. I have a page on Patreon, and it allows you to be a patron of mine. I put my weekly astrology up there. I put my podcasts up there. I put my videos up there, all of which are free for you to use. And I would appreciate if you guys who are out there listening might throw $1 or $2 my way and help support me to keep this great wheel turning, which is what it's all about. I've been doing this for 11 years, so I need some support every now and then. I do appreciate it if you do chip in. It doesn't require much. You spend money on coffee and tea all day, so why not $1 or $2 for what you listen to on the radio? Anyway, enough of that pitch. I'm publicly supported, so that's why I need to make that comment. Okay, my guest today is Linda Clark, and we're going to be talking about the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah has often fascinated me because of its deep divination roots that it has and its ability to sort of paint pictures in a different way. And there's a lot of synergy there between the Kabbalah and astrology, and we're going to be discussing that today. So welcome to the show today, Linda. It's great to have you on.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm excited to enlighten everybody about Kabbalistic astrology.
Yeah. Why don't you give us sort of the background of it, at least get the show on the road, get the show started.
Okay. The perspective that one uses when looking at astrology from a Kabbalistic approach is that man has free will. And we are all brought here with a mission, and our mission is to heal ourselves and to heal the universe. So in astrology, we totally believe that the planets have a direct effect on our soul. And we look at Kabbalistic astrology from the perspective that the minute you are born, that's why the birth time is extremely important. The minute you are born, God puts a soul in your body, and your birth chart is created. And it is with that chart that you are born at exactly the right moment so that you can come to the universe, be the best that you can be, and enable yourself to make a difference and heal any past life issues that you have, and be able to take your North Node, which is the North Node refers to your mission on life in the universe now, and your South Node refers to your past reincarnation. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's so important that we have the exact birth time, because in astrology we love to be able to use the houses.
Yes.
And if you don't have the exact birth time, then all you can really interpret the signs without the houses. And once you enjoy and appreciate using all the houses, it's such a richer interpretation. How do you feel about the houses?
Oh, I think they're invaluable. Without them, you don't know where the action is. You sort of have to have that sets the orientation of the chart. So I think it's really important to know the rising sign and the time of birth for that specific reason. I agree with you. You can get quite a bit out of the chart without that, but you don't have the sort of the proximity of where the action will be occurring. I think it's important to know that, and because when you do know that, you will actually witness the action unveiling in your life when you know the precision of that house placement. So I agree with you. Yeah.
Yes, because so many times people say to me, well, I'm not exactly sure what the time is and the number, and I always explain to them, well, then this experience of getting your natal chart interpreted isn't going to be as enriching of an experience.
That's
because
right.
the houses play such a big part of that.
Right.
So part of how I got into this, everybody, how did you get involved in astrology? And when I was 14, my family, it was my birthday, and I had a couple of relatives that were very immersed in astrology, and they gave me a book, and they said, you have to memorize the book. And it was actually Grant Louie. It was that book.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So relatives said to me, if you don't memorize the book, you really won't be able to discuss this with me intelligently. So I said, no problem. I have a pictorial mind. I was happy to memorize the book. So I memorized the book, and then I wound up. I worked on a retail sales floor, and I was always asking everybody, when's your birthday? What is your sign? And back, 50 years ago, everybody was talking about signs. It was just a cool thing to be doing. So I wound up realizing how complex human beings are, and that your sun sign is like your outside, but your moon is your emotional nature, and Mercury is how we communicate, and Venus is how we love, and Mars is our drive and ambition, and Jupiter our blessings, and Saturn how we handle our tasks and just any karma that we're given, how we stand up and handle everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I wound up realizing how complex human beings were. And my dad always used to say to me, you have such a good sense innately of human nature. So I think when you're drawn to astrology and you really love it, it just fills every fiber of your body and you want to talk about it.
Well, because I think largely because it's so accurate. It's so accurate. I mean, that's part of it. I think a large part of it is the accuracy in there and the precision. Many people disparage of astrology because they think it's, it's sort of made up some sort of mysticism, but it really is incredibly accurate. And that accuracy is directly derived from the point you made about how we draw up a chart and how precise it may be. Once you do that, and then you begin to talk to a perfect stranger. My situation was very similar to yours. I met a person when I was about 20 years old, and they asked me my birth coordinates. I happened to know what time I was born. I had my birth certificate, and I gave it to them. This was somebody I'd never met before, a perfect stranger, stranger. And the next day she came back in with, 7 pages of written descriptions about me, handwritten descriptions of who I was. And I was completely stunned, and I was completely bitten by the bug then, and I still stand by now. I'm still skeptical. I'm still doubtful at moments in time because it seems so bizarre.
Yeah.
But when you stop and see how the stuff plays out with your lives and how precise it is, especially with regard to themes, when you see those themes recur in your life and happen again and again based on the transit, you can't help but admire it and acknowledge that it is accurate.
Yes, it's so true.
So how does the Kabbalah match into this? Yeah, how does the Kabbalah work then? Could you give us some of the background of the Kabbalah?
Yes. The Kabbalah is basically the spiritual side of Judaism.
I see.
The Kabbalah includes astrology, numerology, face reading, hand reading. So it has all of those different studies in it. And it also explains the mysticism. And you've always heard that line, as above, so below.
Right.
That's in the Kabbalah. In other words, we believe that everything that happens in the spiritual universe up above is brought down into the physical. And if someone says to you, well, if this is my natal chart, how can I change that? I don't like that I, let's say, have these negativities.
Right.
We believe that here's how you change it spiritually. We tell people, number one, you do good deeds. When you do good deeds, you bring in divine energy.
Mm-hmm.
When your vessel is filled with good deeds, and there are 5 particular good deeds that are considered exalted good deeds. One of them is visiting the sick.
Yes.
We believe that when you visit the sick,
mm-hmm.
you take away 1/60, 1/60th of their illness when you go and visit them.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is. It is very good.
So that is one of the exalted good deeds that you can do. The other one is when someone is getting married, a bride, you can participate in helping the bride set up her house, or like going to a wedding or throwing a shower, because you're helping a bride. Escorting the dead, like if you're involved in a funeral, or in the olden days, if somebody would walk by the road and see someone that wasn't buried.
Mm-hmm.
That's an exalted deed that you can do.
Oh, I see.
Isn't that so? These are things.
So, sort of the idea of offering
yes.
charity and succor to people, helping them to come to their terms, helping them ease their pain, are all gifts. And
Yes.
even the Dalai Lama says the same. He says, the greatest gift of all is the greatest way of living and manifesting your life is to give to others.
Yes, in a way that you can't be repaid.
Right.
Because when you're doing these things for, let's say, a bride, or you're visiting the sick, like part of what I do at the seminary where I teach is I teach rabbinic students how to do prayer services in the nursing home.
Mm-hmm.
So I take them with me and I show them. I do a Shabbat service every Friday in a nursing home. Or like we have the Jewish holiday, the New Year coming up. So I'll go do a New Year service. Any holiday that we have, you go there. And the type of nursing home that I go to is for end-of-life issues.
I see. So
these are people, when I see them, I know that I might not see them next week.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still in the service, and they're involved with the music. And the music is so healing to people.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people that have not been able to talk for 5 years, and when you play a song that they know, they start singing it.
Right. That's one of the few things that remains in the memory is the sense of melody. But when you look at the Kabbalah as a divination tool, is each I'm looking at a chart, a diagram. Is each chart unique in its representation of an individual? Everybody has a unique chart as they do in astrology.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in other words, we do the astrology chart because where the North Node is where someone's mission is.
Okay.
So let's say Kabbalistically, we're going to read someone's chart. I still read like a regular astrology reading.
Okay.
For example, where's your sun and your moon? But the added perspective is, what is your mission here?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, where is your North Node? What sign is it in?
Yeah.
So that's your personal mission. And then the house is no different than like you would do in a house.
Right.
But the different perspective is that we always believe that you can pray to God, that you can always change. It's funny, the word mazel, like you've heard the word mazel tov?
Right.
When people are having, mazel means constellations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting.
It doesn't mean, so it doesn't mean like good, like mazel tov, good luck. We believe Kabbalistically that because when you're born, where the constellations are
mm-hmm.
is why you were brought to Earth. So by studying the North and South Node, the planets all have the same perspective. Like if you're a Libra, a Libra sun,
right.
we would interpret that as the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't so much that the planets have different meanings. The houses don't have different meanings. The perspective is that we want people to always be uplifted and realize that, God controls the universe. So you, through prayer and doing good deeds, you elevate your soul. You never have to feel like you're going to have bad luck or something bad happen to you. You have free will to change that.
Right. Well, there are limitations within that, though, I would argue, because I have had that conversation before with clients, people who come to see me, in particular, would say, I don't like my chart. I don't like the fact that I have this here or that there. And I say to them, well, you can't really change any of that, because this is these are the instructions that you were given upon your birth. Mm-hmm. What your wise are doing is to be able to, if there's a character trait in your chart that you are not fond of, you try to find the opposite of that mode or quality or attribute in your chart, and do just the opposite, because that allows you to redirect the energy. The energy will be there based on a theme, but there's always the duality purpose. And so if you're unhappy with the way you handle money, or unhappy with the way you are an impatient person or whatever, you try to find a way to redirect that energy, which is naturally inherent in your personality, into a more positive and constructive method. And you'll find that it does work and makes your life better, and that allows you to cope with that attribute that you're not fond of in your own personal attribute, your characteristics.
But how many times do you always hear now in society spiritual talk where people say, attention goes where energy flows. In other words, if you think it, you can believe it. And they'll say, don't think negative thoughts, you bring it to you. So much.
But I'm not sure I'm not sure that's true. Do you believe that 100%? That if you think negative thoughts?
I think that we have to try to always keep people in the process of living and not in the process of dying. And what I mean by that is we have to uplift people. Even though we know some people have a tendency to be more sad and they're too hard on themselves and they worry too much, we have to say to people, I feel, in life, that yes, you are a warrior, and you do always try to be a perfectionist, but please realize that you're like this, and you're very hard on yourself. So I feel there is some of that honesty you have to give somebody when you're reading their chart, but you also say, yes, you worry too much, but on the other side, you're very conscientious.
Right, and because you worry, you bring attention to that, and then you try to make that better, to resolve that.
Yes, but yet on the other hand, if you want somebody to do a job and you're looking for someone who's going to be detail-oriented and responsible, you want it to be conscientious like that.
Of course you do. That's the perfect opportunity, which is kind of ironic because the person, I think, when I first think of that as a worrier, I think of a Virgo, or someone with a strong Virgo component, and they are, of course, they're very detail-oriented, so it's perfect.
Yes, because I was just thinking, I when I was doing this one woman's chart, about every fifth word out of her mouth was worry. And yes, she did have a lot of Virgo in her chart. And I said to her, it's great you have that Virgo in your chart, but let's try to take that energy that you have, and that's very conscientious what you're doing. Let's try to channel that. And when you see you're getting all spun out and getting all worrisome, you have to realize, yes, I do have that attribute in my chart. However, if your mission is to do something here that's very responsible, sometimes we might have that quality, but on the other hand, it does enable us to be the best that we can be in our mission. So we don't always understand things while we are in them, in the pain and agony, if you will. But sometimes as time passes, you realize, wow, look what I learned from that experience, and look at how it changed my life.
Right.
And you can have understanding for other people, because when you experience some of these terrible things in life, you really have the ability to become far more compassionate.
Right. It's an opportunity. It's not. You shouldn't see it as an opportunity or as a defeat. You should see it as an opportunity to learn and grow.
But here's another. I had one lady, I was looking at her chart, and she had all trines. I said, wow. And I said, tell me a little a bit about yourself. She goes, oh, well, when I was 5, I was a genius. And, my family always left me money. I never really had to work. And she's going on and on. And here she was like 62 brilliant. I said, so, what have you done? She goes, oh, I really didn't have to ever do anything. And then I'll be looking at somebody else's chart, like you have like all these squares, and, like the cardinal cross and all this kind of stuff going on in the chart. And you go, you know what? They keep going. They're strong. That adversity made them stronger.
Of course. That's exactly right, which is where you learn. That's the growth. That's why I've always said that the squares in the chart are your greatest gifts. The trines are nice, but they do also, I think the trines in some ways breed apathy and sort of complacency, where people are not willing to drive. Like you mentioned, that person's not willing to, doesn't have any real natural drive or inclination to do something because a lot of their life has been there. But somewhere in their chart, there's a square that's going to have to wake them up, and that'll be their challenge. And their challenge may very well be that their life is too easy, and they need to have that be changed.
Right, because you only get self-esteem in life when you do things yourself. Mm-hmm. And when you make things so easy for people and they do become complacent, it does affect their self-esteem, because we have to earn our self-respect to our own soul.
Right.
And we do that through meeting challenges and, being the best that we can be. So sometimes we don't understand why we have all these aggravations and all these kind of things, and we have to do a lot of soul searching. But when you sit and look at all the different charts of people, you realize that adversity does build strength.
It does. And without that, you really don't get much, because you have to experience, you've got to walk the walk in order to talk the talk. I mean, men will never know what it's like to be pregnant. And so we have to be cognizant of the fact that because we don't know that, we can't really walk in those shoes. We can't wear those shoes. But there are things in life that we can, empathize with, and that's what you've got to do. It is truly through the hardship. And does the Kabbalah illustrate that the same way?
Well, in Kabbalah, we feel that when you are having hardship, this is when you have to, we say, go do charity, because when you give charity, there's 3 ways that you can fix your mazel, if you will, your constellations, and eat charity. You can do prayer, because we are very into prayer. We have prayers for everything. There is a specific prayer for if you want healing, if you want, more abundance, whatever it is, because we believe when you pray, you bring in divine energy, and it does help heal you. So prayer is one of the ways. Charity is another way. And I think so much of these ways are kind of like getting out of your own self and connecting more with other people, mm-hmm. and looking at life more spiritual.
Right.
Because all of the spirituality doesn't have to be something that no one can use. We all realize that the spiritual world and the physical world are connected. It's just some people have a greater need to be more spiritual, and other people are just more logical. It's no different than like with astrology.
Right.
You have people that are, want to be very emotional. Like a water sign is far more emotional than somebody that would can you imagine somebody with a total air chart versus somebody with a total water chart?
Much different person, yeah.
Isn't it? So we all come here with different souls, and we have to figure out how we can take that birth chart that we were given and be the best that we can be, and also heal the universe at the same time, because it isn't just about you. You have a mission for your own self, but also you have to look spiritually at healing the greater good also. So I think that's the difference, is you realize the mission component in Kabbalistic astrology is so big, mm-hmm. that it forces you to not be so self-centered, because you have to realize, okay, this is my mission. But why am I here? The word is tikkun, which is healing. Why am I here to heal myself and the universe? And I think that kind of mentality creates people that become stronger and more self-confident.
Because of their actions towards the rest of the world. Yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yes, it isn't just about you. Because people are not happy when they're like that.
No, they become self-centered, which you really do.
Yes.
It's a question of giving back. Giving back is what we are our destiny. I think that's what we're chosen to do. I think that's sort of the underlying philosophy in almost all the work that I do. I mean, as I mentioned earlier in the opening, I do all this because I feel as if it's necessary for people to hear and learn about astrology and all these mystical tools. And if I can start that dialogue and elevate people's interest in some level, then I've succeeded. I feel as if that is a giving back to the world. And I don't do it with any preconceived notions. I've just always done it. I don't even think about it. And it's a way of offering something to others that allows them to grow and expand, and it is truly the greatest gift. That is the gift. Giving is the gift that we are here to give. And many of us,
yes.
I think perhaps as you mentioned, are reluctant to do that because they're more concerned with their own comfort level or their own sense
yes.
of who they are. They become too interior. They become too inward looking as opposed to outward looking. But
but that's why.
Yeah, go ahead.
Don't you think everybody, if people knew like where their north node and their south node were, if they understood their mission in their past life, they would have a greater understanding of themselves. I had one lady call me.
Of course they would, yeah.
And she said to me, she was a therapist. She was like in her 50s. She was a therapist, and I gave her a 1-hour reading. And by the time I was off the phone with her, she said, I never really knew myself. She said, I can't believe all the things you said to me. I never really knew. And this is my line of work. I have been a therapist my whole life. I have had more therapists love astrology than any other type.
Oh, me too. That's very interesting. Interesting you mentioned that. I've had more therapists. If I had to look at my client base, the most people who've come to see me have been therapists.
Yes, me too.
Very unusual. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Isn't it? I think because they realize when you start taking the planets and you talk about the sun and the moon, and we create individuals as complex beings and what each of these planets do,
right.
I think it enables someone to understand themselves. Well, maybe I'm like this emotionally, but you know what? In love, I'm this way. In my drive and ambition, I'm this way. It enables you to pinpoint attributes of a human soul in a very concise, engaging way, and it enables somebody to really look at their soul. Complex form, it's a complex form, the soul, but in astrology, we simplify it.
Well, we make it. Yeah, we give you context, and we give you definite terms that apply to it, and then we allow. At least the way I approach is, astrology, and I think Kabbalah is very much the same. Really, is a series of stories, and the stories are all what makes the person individual, and those stories need to be told, but they need to be interpreted in a way that's unique to the individual as they are. So, a story, we may have the same aspect in our charts, but your story is very different than mine. But the theme of that story will resound and will be the same for both of us. It'll just be manifested differently, I think.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think the thing that people don't realize when they think of astrology, like they all say, oh, are you going to tell me? Sometimes they'll say, well, can you tell me when I'm going to die?
Yeah, I know. I never do that. Never do that.
And I say, well, to begin with, in Kabbalistic astrology, only God knows who shall live and who shall die. Mm-hmm. That is when we go to free will and God. No one knows when someone is going to die. And I say to people, that isn't really what Kabbalistic astrology is about. I go, we're taught that no one knows who shall live and who shall die, only God.
Yeah.
So I really feel that from a perspective of astrology, the way I was taught, is that everybody has the ability to be the best they can be on Earth. And God willing, you get the right, transits and progressions and everything that help you. be the best that you can be. But we can't ever understand any of these issues in life until we really are in the spiritual world. Human nature in life is so complex that spiritually, there's things you may never understand.
Right.
And you just have to have faith. I mean, what do you think about that?
What, things you can't understand and having faith? Oh, I think that's very,
Yes.
yeah. Well, I think you've got to have a certain degree of, there's always going to be an element of the unknown in our lives. But I think what astrology does in concert with everything else you've mentioned is that it provides a sense of context, a framework, a scene. I always use the example of a play. Just to illustrate to people what it's like. You know, if you went into a play and you saw people on stage sitting in a hotel or working in a business office or maybe even working as a policeman, you'd know who they were by their costume. You'd have a theme for what their duty was. And so I think astrology provides that similar sort of theme. It does manifest differently. You know, I have a perfect example. I've got twin boys that were born 6 minutes apart, so everybody would always say, well, they're going to be the same people. They're born close. No, they're not. Each of them has their own experience. They have their own circumstances that they live through, which color the way that their chart has been presented to them. How they interpret that is up to free will, as you mentioned, yes, and how they color that experience and use that is going to be determined by the circumstances that surround that. But I would argue that their approach to those problems or solutions are going to be a similar set of a thought process is going to be similar there because they do share characteristics that are the same. The outcome may be different. The people they choose in their lives will be different, and that will color their experience, but the approach will be similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that impresses me most about astrology is how you can spend an hour with someone doing, let's say, their natal chart and telling them, reading their soul, and it is amazing. You just met this person,
Right.
and you're reading their soul.
Yeah.
This is what blows everybody's mind that I interact with.
Yeah, it's so true.
I
Yeah.
can't believe you knew that about me.
Yeah, it's very true.
The first time you go and you really have that experience, I had one therapist, she got so enthralled with this, she started studying astrology. Mm-hmm. Because she said, I can't believe I never could really understand myself, and I've had all these issues. And she said, now I really feel comfortable. I understand who I am. I think because even though it scares people when you show them that chart, they go, whoa, I don't know what all that means. But when you simplify it and you give each planet a description and you describe what the different aspects are in someone's chart, you're really simplifying their soul and giving them insight into who and what they are.
Right, and you also have got to do
you
that.
You don't ever think about it.
Right, you've got to do that with a clear mind and a strong sense of empathy. I think that's what's most important. We're going to take a break. We're going to take a break here. We're talking today with Linda Clark. We're discussing the concepts of the Kabbalah, the Jewish Kabbalah, and astrology, and their purposes in our lives. We'll be back in about 2.5 minutes to continue the conversation. So hang in there, and we'll be right back.
What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today, or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
Hi, your host, Chris Flisher here. I've been producer and host of this podcast and radio show for the past 10 years. My goal has always been to provide enlightening, progressive, and logical discussions about where we are as a species and how we move ourselves further down the road towards our greater potential. I believe astrology provides a great tool for observing our progress and awakening our consciousness to becoming a whole, better, and more complete individuals. I have sought to invite the best contemporary guests, thought leaders, and progressive minds to discuss topics that concern us all, regardless of your beliefs. Consider making a contribution through PayPal to help keep the great wheel turning so that I can continue for the next 10 years along the same enlightened path. As always, I thank you for your support.
Okay, welcome back to Turning the Wheel. My guest today is Linda Clark, and we're talking about the Kabbalah and astrology and how they're related. And when I'm looking at a Kabbalah diagram, I notice that there are 10 circles, which I imagine represent the 10 planets. If I'm wrong, correct me. But there has got to be a way for these to be interpreted. And I'm wondering how this chart that the Kabbalah represents is read, or how it compares to an astrology chart.
Well, the Sephirot, which is what you're talking about, is we believe that we are all connected very closely with the spiritual world, and in the Kabbalah is the saying, "As above, so below." So if you imagine the top of your head is where you actually have cords that you're connected to the spiritual world. And we believe that when you go to sleep at night, your soul goes up to God, and then when you wake up in the morning, your soul is put back in your body.
Interesting.
So each of those different areas of the parts of the body refer to different types of thought and ways of thinking, because we believe that your soul is there's two types. God is two different elements. God is the masculine God, and God is the feminine God, which is called the Shekhinah. And if you notice in astrology, we have planets that are masculine, and we have planets that are feminine.
Right.
And that is that's how God is seen. God has a masculine side and a feminine side. So from that perspective, Kabbalah and astrology both share that essence of elements.
Interesting.
And when you look, isn't that interesting? And you also realize that the spirituality of Kabbalah and astrology, because astrology is spiritual also, but so much of understanding Kabbalah is because it is in the spiritual world and you can't see all these things. It's like people can't see, let's say, electricity, and yet they can feel its effect. So in Kabbalah, we believe that just because you can't see something doesn't mean it's not there. And there are certain times of the year, let's say, that are considered, they revolve, it's very much connected to all of the holidays. Right. So you start off with the month of Adar, which is like around, kind of Aries. Let's say. And,
so that's like the spring equinox.
Yes. So each of the holidays refers to different things that happened in Judaism, and we say that, like, for example, take Leo, which is the planet of the sun, and in Kabbalah, everything is more moon-oriented.
Right.
We are so it's not this. So when in Kabbalah, the month of Av, which is when Leo is, we have had like a lot of disasters happen, let's say, in society. So that might be a time when, in astrology, we really wouldn't. It really revolves more around the the holidays.
Right.
Because
Well, and the holidays are derived from the sort of like the pagan practice of following the seasons.
Yes.
And natural events. Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
Right. But I think the difference is, like, in Judaism, to give you an example, the month of Libra, which is the scales, is the time of year when everybody is, let's say, praying for the new holiday, and they want to make sure that, we do all these prayers to elevate our soul. Because then in the month of Scorpio, which, let's say in astrology is around November, we are supposed to take all the lessons that we learned during our prayer and all the blessings and take those in that month of Scorpio and use those attributes to refine our soul and make ourselves stronger. And it's interesting that falls in the month of Scorpio, because just, how Scorpios are very sensitive, and Scorpios can be, in their exalted sense, they are so intuitive. And yet when a Scorpio gets, upset and revengeful, you don't want to mess with them.
Right.
So you have to realize in life that you can take a planet like Scorpio and are you going to use the revengeful side of it, or are you going to take this time and make yourself intuitive, more wise? Because intuition is a great thing.
Right.
So you have to realize that you always have opportunities in life to interpret something. Are you going to be part of the positive or part of the negative? And that is so important when you are looking at a chart or when you're interpreting something, because you want to make sure that you uplift people, still be honest, but let them know, listen, you have the choice here. Are you going to take that Scorpio that you're, let's say as a Scorpio, like I have Scorpio Mars, am I going to take that drive and ambition, and am I going to try to use some intuition to try to help people, or am I going to take it and just sit around and be revengeful and never do anything?
Right.
So that's really, you have to, every sign has the ability to use it for good or do nothing with it and, just wait.
Well, that's the duality of astrology and the duality of everything. Everything has a positive and a negative component to it. How those are manifested depends upon the individual, which is what we were talking about earlier. If we have these themes and these instructions, we can use energy in both ways. Now, in the example of twins, as I mentioned, one twin might do something good with their sense of righteousness, and one twin might do something wrong. But the commonality is that they're both driven in the same way, one positive, one negative. I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that's an example.
Exactly. And I think that the thing that we have to always realize is that when you are looking at a person, or like doing a natal chart, or whatever type of astrology you do, you always put in perspective that you want to empower people.
Yes.
Because I
for their greater good, always for their greater good.
Yes. Because so many times I think, like I'm teaching a class in astrology to rabbinic students with a rabbi, and we're going to be talking about, Kabbalah and astrology, as opposed to just last time when I was teaching the lay people, this wasn't the students, but it was just, basic astrology, nothing to do with, the Kabbalah and all that.
Right.
Astrology. And I think the thing that people always say is, well, I don't want to hear if I'm going to die, or I don't want to know about prediction and scare people. I think so many times people are afraid of astrology because they're afraid we're going to say something that's going to scare them, or like if somebody says, "Oh, you're never going to be able to do this."
Well, that's irresponsible. I think that's irresponsible. If somebody were to taint somebody, and that's the right word I want to use. If somebody were to put that idea in their head that they were not going to be, anybody who's a negative astrologer should not be a practicing astrologer, because they're not heralding the person's greater good. You want to always rise to the
Right.
greater good. You never want to sink to the depths like that. That's
Exactly.
unethical.
Because don't you really think that I find young people are fascinated with astrology.
Yeah.
I can go up to. I was at a party, and I ever since back in 1999 when I finally realized that I could take that little cell phone and go all over. It was like that, the Astro.com. It's like you just had all those planets right at your fingertips. It's so much fun to be going up to people, and they always want to know, well, how do you see my personality? What do you think? The computer changed astrology.
It did dramatically. It changed. It made it more accessible for people, and it took away. In some ways, it helped it. In some ways, it harmed it. I would argue, because in some ways, by having it too accessible, it means most people can go off and figure out their stuff on their own. Where I think that the interpretive quality that an astrologer brings to the conversation is worth it, because we have a greater framework from which to draw the information as opposed to just jumping in.
Because I think we see patterns.
Well, we do see patterns. Of course you do. That's the whole purpose, yeah.
Yes. And you do enough charts, and you kind of like have it in your book of life and in your head that you also get, I think if you're drawn to this kind of thing and you're enthralled with it, I think it enables you to see that it is science and art. And it isn't just a matter of plugging in, a Gemini moon means this.
Right.
A sun in this. It isn't like putting together a puzzle where you go and you take a piece and you put it in. There's art and science to looking at the whole chart as a whole, not just what does a Gemini moon mean,
Right.
What is a Mars in Scorpio. There is a certain art and finesse and skill that comes from looking at so many charts and seeing patterns that I think it's the art that is so beautiful. It's like you're an artist. Everybody creates a different picture.
Yes.
And you want to make sure that you see the nuances. Are you noticing that some areas are darker, some are lighter, and you want to appreciate humans in depth.
Yes, because we are complicated people, and there's a lot of that lies beneath the surface that is useful and valuable. And I think we get sidetracked because we are not aware of some of these aspects, and we go off and we act emotionally without this background of knowing. And I think that if more people knew what their attributes were, what they consisted of, what their personality really represented via the charts, if people were more inclined towards that, they would be far more enlightened as to what their potential is. It's in many ways, I've always said this, in many ways, astrology provides the ability for us to tolerate each other, because we can say, listen, so-and-so may not be what my cup of tea, but this is the way they were born, and we cannot change that. So it allows us to have this ability to say, okay, I accept you for what you are. You're not my cup of tea, but let's move on anyway, and we'll try to solve something together. There's great wisdom, and there's strength in that. It really does provide a certain sense of societal glue to keep things together.
It does.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's also like people will say to me, well, I'm a Leo and I'm like this or whatever. And I always say, listen, that's where your sun is. It would be like me saying to you, all people with brown hair like me are the same. You can't, astrology is so complex and so layered that people have. I love like what you say on your show to say that people should read your sun sign, read your ascendant.
Yeah.
When you want people to realize we're complex, and so is astrology, because we're talking about humans, and what's more complex than humans?
Oh, I know, very much so. Yeah, and I think that's what the Kabbalah and perhaps astrology do, and they work together. So I guess there was a conscious decision within the Jewish religion to accept this as opposed to reject this, because if you look at Catholicism and other, fundamentalism, they are all very much against the astrology, whereas the Kabbalah, which is a direct representation of the Jewish faith, actually accepts that. Just that in itself gives large credence to the validity of the study, and I find that to be fascinating. I know that many people rejected astrology because of its sort of otherworldly qualities, and yet they're denying themselves great information if they're doing so.
Yeah, but I think because Kabbalah is so involved with understanding that personal tikkun, that personal healing and mission, that we want people to realize that with astrology, we can help you identify your past weaknesses through your South Node.
Yeah.
And we want people to recognize that you're brought here with baggage from previous lives. Mm-hmm. And by us reading your chart, we can help you avoid aggravations that you may have and help you overcome your fears, because you realize that some of the attributes you have are here so that you be the best you can be, and you also are here to heal the universe. So I think by keeping this in a spiritual venue, we are not scaring people.
No.
And I think a lot of it, nobody wants somebody to say to them, "Oh, you have to be careful," because we tell people there are no bad signs.
Of course not. Yeah.
And there are different opportunities, and you have to really realize that we're all brought here for a mission. So I think because it stays in such a spiritual venue, it does not take away from the respect people have for religion and God and going to temple or church. Do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly, yeah.
We're not trying to take away the purpose or religion of anybody. We are trying to just enrich people with the self-wisdom to understand why you're brought here and what you can do to be the best you can be.
Right.
There's no scaring anybody here. And I think that really has enabled the Kabbalistic approach to last for such a long time, because we are trying to use it to uplift people and help them on their mission.
Yeah.
And when you look at it from that perspective, it doesn't shed a bad light or take away from, listen, we're saying you want to change your mazel or your constellations. You have the ability. Go do good deeds and bring in that divine energy. Go pray. We totally believe prayer and is such a powerful thing in giving charity. So there is nothing about this that would scare someone and cause them to ever reject it, because there isn't that issue of anybody's going to say to you, you're going to, this is going to happen or that's going to happen. I just think that free will, those words of free will, give people empowerment, and it doesn't scare the reputation or harm the reputation of astrology.
Right. They do have to work together, and they do. And it's interesting, though. But you see my point, though, about the fact that the Jewish religion is willing to accept this in as part of their divination process and part of their as one of the tools in their tool bag, whereas others, strong religions, are totally against it. It seems somewhat short-sighted to be rejecting it. It's not as if you have to, use one over the other. It's not a matter of astrology versus Christ or astrology versus God.
Exactly.
It's a combination of working together, which makes them so valuable. And for them to reject them, they really miss quite a bit of valuable information that's there for them.
But you know what I think? The fact that some people need a big sense of spirituality, and some people love learning astrology. It's almost like a personality type. Once people really appreciate it and get into it, it's so complex and fascinating that if you're the kind of person that loves it, you will become enthralled.
Yeah, you can't deny it. Yeah, right, exactly.
But it has such power. So maybe that's why it also threatens other.
Well, I agree. I think it does. That's exactly the part of it. There is a sense of threat there, which is part of the reason why it was disparaged. I'm sure the authorities within the church said that we can't have this. It's gonna lead people astray, or who knows what. But it is interesting to think that I find it fascinating that they are at least acknowledged and brought into brought into as I said, mentioned as a toolbox. I mean, I think that's really important to have that, because it shows they're willing to work within a number of different tools that are provided by the universe to help find peace and happiness and people's ultimate goal in their life, their true purpose. People oftentimes talk about, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? And they're not
Isn't
always...
that such a big question? People always want to know, why am I here? Why was I brought here?
Right. What was my real true purpose here? Was it to be this, to be that?
Yeah.
And the answer is in there. It's in the charts. It's in the Kabbalah as well. But I also find that it has a sense of, predestiny to it, as you mentioned. And the Presbyterians, interestingly enough, are also willing to embrace the idea of predestiny, which is unusual for a Protestant religion. But they do embrace predetermination. And one of the greatest examples of that is through Mark Edmund Jones and the Sabian Symbols, who actually everything was based on astrology, and yet he was a Presbyterian minister at the same time. So I really enjoy that place where the two meet, where the astrology, the art, and the science of astrology meets with the spiritual capacity we bring to the earth, because they really do work together. And
yes.
Yeah.
And you know what? You never want to have anybody not enjoy something that's in the universe and that was brought here for us to really relish in, and it's so enriching.
Yeah. So
once you get into astrology, I mean, I couldn't imagine my life without it. I love it.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, obviously I agree. That's why I do my show. Yeah. But are you able to construct a Kabbalah chart the same way you can a astrology chart? Those symbols that we see. Can you explain just briefly what those symbols are? I mean, I'm looking at a chart right now, and I've got 10 circles. Are those 10 circles representative of the planets? Is that correct?
No. Here's what happens. Why I'm always leery to do that. When you look at documentation about what planet represents what aspect in the Sephiroth, I always find different research.
I see.
And when I cannot see, the Sephiroth refers to man, all the different aspects of man. And the problem is, when I have tried to research, I will see different research shows different planets in different Sephiroth. So that is why I am always leery.
Yeah, I see your point. Yeah, I see your point. I do. But it's used the same way. I mean, there is a physical chart is drawn, and from the physical chart, a skilled reader is able to derive information there, just as in an astrology chart that allows us to express and determine and describe the individual who we're talking about. So that's what's most important.
Yes. See, but the thing is, the Sephiroth, what it describes is each different aspects of somebody, like, the crown, the keter, the top. That's the way we connect to the spiritual world. Whereas Bina, the circle on the left when you're looking at it, is more understanding.
Right.
And the other one, Chokmah, is wisdom. And you have like mercy. We could kind of say, would you say mercy is Jupiter? I mean, some interpretations.
I see. Yeah, I see.
You see what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. But the chart was derived. How was this chart derived? And does it reflect something of some sort of natural order within the universe? Is there a mathematical component to it?
The chart was derived that we are all brought here with different aspects that create our personality. And we each have to have all of these to have balance.
I see.
And the most important thing is that, because if you notice on the chart, the center of the chart says Tiferet, which is balance and beauty. Okay. All of the lines lead into that, the balance.
Right.
So, for an example, we want to have wisdom, of course, but we need to have understanding. We want to have mercy, but we must have discernment. Right. In other words, you can kill somebody with kindness. You could have mercy and let a little kid run around doing whatever they want. Oh, I don't want to pick on them. I don't want to pick on them. But then you're not giving them discernment, where you have to say, wait a minute, if you keep eating all that candy, you're going to get a stomachache.
Right.
So, mercy is a wonderful thing, but you can kill somebody with kindness.
That's true. And that's a very good point, because that, again, again, that brings back the dualistic quality in which we're talking about, because for every aspect or every attribute we have, there is a component that is the opposite of that. And it's through the balance of the opposites that we really come to. And I think that we, as individuals, are dualistic people. We're entering into a dualistic age. I mean, we can see that clearly. We have the binary world, the digital world is dualistic. Perhaps this is where we're supposed to go. But it does raise those interesting points, and I do appreciate that, because there is always, it's always like, what's the other side of the coin say? You flip the coin, or we have to have this balance. It's like a gigantic pendulum swinging back and forth between good and bad, and then measured back again, and all that. It's fascinating to see that. We are running out of time, though, Linda.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
But I was going to say, you can see, if you research and you look at like all the different meanings,
right.
I have charts that I will notice that they take Saturn and they make Saturn understanding, and they make Uranus wisdom.
Okay.
And they made Mercy Jupiter, okay, and Mars discernment.
Okay.
All right. And they gave the Sun to Ferret, which is balance.
Okay.
They gave the Moon, which is foundation, and they made the Ascendant like being grounded, like having your 2 feet on the ground, which is actually the female side of God, as opposed to Keter, the top, which is how we're connected to the spiritual world. But you can see, if you take the planets and you simplify it to that level,
it makes perfect sense.
Subject to opinion.
Yeah.
And the words of the Kabbalah are really attributes that we all want to have. So you really can't simplify it.
Right. No, that's good. Can you finish out those? Yeah. So I was just writing those down because I'm curious as to what they are. What's the word in the Kabbalah for Gemini? What's their word? Their single word that they use?
It's interesting that when you're looking at the Sephirot, which is what we were talking about there before, you can see that there. If you Google it, you'll notice.
Yeah, I will do that. I will do that.
And with all pictures, you'll see there's all the interpretation.
Okay, all right, I will do that, and then the rest of people can do that as well, because we have run out of time. I don't want to run over.
Okay.
But I think that's a good way is to perhaps Google the idea of Kabbalah, see how the two match up together. But the overarching theme that I kind of want to get through to people here, and I think we've done a good job of that, is that there is a direct correlation between the Kabbalah and astrology. They are both divination tools used by these religions to help people find their course in life. And through that, there's a great deal of wisdom, and it allows you to live to your greatest purpose, which is what our goal always should be. We should always live to our purpose, because that's why we're here. So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
and I enjoy that.
And all of the planets mean the same thing.
Right,
like
of course.
Mercury in the Kabbalistic is communication.
Right, just as it is in Vedic
mean
astrology.
The same thing.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. So. Well, it's been great. I'm glad we had a chance to talk about this, Linda. It's really been enlightening, and I do appreciate that your knowledge of it, and I love the fact that there's this direct correlation. I was not completely aware of it. I knew there was some sort of correlation, but I didn't realize it was as clear and cut as this. So I do appreciate
it. Totally the same.
My guest today has been Linda Clark, and we've been talking about the Kabbalah and astrology and how the two are married or intermingled and how closely they are related to each other, and I do appreciate that. So thanks for talking today and coming on to Turning of the Wheel. I do appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.